Good morning and welcome. It's Bible study live time, and I'm here live in the study. My name's Colin. If you don't know who I am, I'm the pastor of Winslow Christian Fellowship, and this is Bible Study Live, where I basically start looking at the passage that I'm going to preach on Sunday morning and just spend time mulling over it. You get to hear me mumble away and think about words and think about sentences and think about the implications of those words and sentences. And it's high adrenaline stuff. Now, the advice that one person gave me was that she found the best way to watch this was afterwards, not live, but to watch it afterwards at 1.5 times the speed. You go into YouTube, you can click on the little gear icon at the bottom of the video and click on 1.5 times the speed. And that way you can still understand what I'm saying, but you don't watch me musing and you don't have to get bored listening to me mumble away to myself about things. And as I slowly type things out, it actually types out much quicker. So that's one way of doing it. The benefit of watching live is that you can ask questions in the live chat. I've got the live chat open here. I can see if anybody asks a question, I can answer it, and you can say, why did you do that? Why did you say that? Why do you think that? Or you can point something out to me that I haven't thought of as I'm looking at the passage. So here we are. This is what we're looking at. It's Mark chapter 6 verses 30 to 44. It's the next section of Mark, on from what I looked at last week, and I shall read it now. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught, and he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing, and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. Okay, that's interesting. I think it's something that struck me there. It's because it's the ESV, the kind of translation that you read from can make a difference. And that word desolate, can click on the tab and open the NIV anglicized. There the word is solitary, but go back to the ESV and they go into this desolate place, which is an interesting word. It's like solitary makes sense, but desolate, why desolate? That's an interesting use of a word. So that's something that just immediately jumped out at me. But what's happening here, just sort of initially go to the notes and start thinking in terms of the overview, the big picture of this passage. So it starts off by telling us about the apostles' return. So this follows the training mission of the disciples when Jesus sent them out to the villages 2 by 2. And now they've come back, and in between reading about them going on this mission and this coming back, we've seen the story of Herod taking John's head off, cutting off his head. Really brings home the risks that they're taking by following Jesus and becoming one of his apostles, one of his disciples. It's a dangerous business. You upset the wrong person, you could lose your head. So that's they're back now, and he's telling them to rest a while. So so they come back from this mission. They need to rest. So they retreat, but are followed by crowds. When Jesus teaches the crowds, doesn't he? So Jesus teaches the crowds, then the disciples came to him. Disciples want to send them away to get food, but Jesus tells them to feed the crowd, which they miraculously do. So that's the basic what's happening. They're trying to get their rest. They need to rest. And it's part of Jesus' training that this is what happened to him, is that he's working hard, he needs to rest, but the crowds wouldn't leave him alone, and now they're having to experience that. The crowds won't leave us alone. And then when they say, perfectly reasonably, the people haven't got any food, send them off to go and get food, he says, you feed them. Which, number one, they haven't got the energy or resources to feed anybody. Number two, they're exhausted. But Jesus gives them what they need. So it's a good story. It's immediately you're kind of seeing just how powerful it is as a Christian to read this and to think, what use am I? What can I do in seeking to serve people? Okay, so I'm going to go through it verse by verse. I know the chances of me getting all the way through this entire passage today very slim. I know that in an hour this 13, 14 verses, I'm not gonna be able to get through them all, and that's frustrating. But the whole point of Bible study, I mean, one of the main things I need to do when I'm studying the Bible is slow myself down, which is frustrating and annoying. And I can't just speed the process up 1.5 times. You can watch it afterwards 1.5 times faster. But I can't think that fast. The apostles returned. Let's put it on there. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. The apostles returned to Jesus. So let's just flesh out that. This comes after training mission, the disciples are full of it. Probably quite excited, aren't they? Because ministry to others is exciting. You feel like you're doing something, and you have the opportunity to see God at work through you and in you, in fact. So they're telling Jesus all that they had done and taught. They have been doing things which would have included healings and casting out demons, I think. Let's go back and have a quick look back before Herod. And they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them. So all that they had done and the things that they taught, which would have been the things Jesus taught them. So they're doing what Jesus did. Then we go on to verse 31, and he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while, for many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat." So Jesus suggested they needed to get away. And retreat from the crowds to get their strength up. My spelling's lovely, isn't it? Look at that, it goes all over the place. Right, this word desolate. What's going on there? If I hover over desolate, then I get this definition coming up. And the Greek there is eremos. Lonesome, waste, desert, desolate, solitary wilderness, yeah. If I go over to a word study, then desolate, desert, open, wilderness. Let's have a look at this definition. Eremia, primarily a solitude and uninhabited place. In contrast to a town or village is translated deserts in Hebrews 11:38, the wilderness in Matthew 15:33. That is the same word, isn't it? Desolate, Eremia. Just forgotten. Yeah, eremos. Wilderness in 2 Corinthians 11:26. A desert place in Mark 8:4. Yeah, it does not always denote a barren region void of vegetation. It is often use of a place uncultivated but fit for pasturage. Okay, so yeah, so desolate is perhaps a bit more negative in English than the original word. ESV uses the word desolate, which probably sounds more negative than in the Greek. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a kind of wasteland. And we don't use the ESV, we use the NIV, which uses the word solitary. So that's good. NIV. So I don't really need to explain that one on Sunday. Probably better, although I'm sure translators will explain why desolate is a good translation. So come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they don't. It's because many were coming and going. What's that mean? Are they coming, getting healed, then going? They were coming and going. Why were they coming and going rather than staying? That's the question. On my mind anyway. Let's jump into a bit early, but why not? Let's have a look at what the this says about the mission activity of the 12. Caught the attention of large numbers of people who pursued after the disciples as early as they sought the benefactions of Jesus. Mark conveys the impression of one group following another as he reports that many were coming and going, with the result that the 12 had no leisure to eat. One group following another. Yeah, so as soon as one group is satisfied, another bunch come along. As a result, the disciples couldn't even eat food. And as much as the Word of God is food for the soul, in the end we still need to eat protein, carbs, and all the rest of it, vitamins, etc. We still need proper food, physical food for our physical bodies, or we're going to drop dead. And so the disciples do need to eat, and that's significant, isn't it? Because we know that later on food is going to be the issue that Jesus will miraculously solve for other people. And he said, yeah, when he says to them, you give them something to eat, he's not even saying, well, you, addressing the fact that deep down they're saying, well, we're the ones who are hungry. I think that's probably an interesting issue. Verse 32. Let's go on to verse 32. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. So, verse 32. They went off in a boat, which perhaps mirrors when Jesus set off for the other side of the lake and met a demon-possessed man. Was Jesus looking to rest then, but found a host of demons to deal with? Sounds like it, doesn't it? Jesus went off on a boat earlier on, met the demon-possessed man. They go off on a boat and they're not met with demons, they're just met with hungry people. They don't have to face a crowd of demons, but a crowd of hungry people. But they are mirroring Jesus. And it's wherever they go. Now this is interesting, isn't it? Actually, the fact that people came. I'm jumping ahead, aren't I? Let's just look at this verse. Slow down, Colin. Slow down, look at this verse. Now many saw them going and recognized them. They are recognizable and therefore will be chased. They are paying the price of fame. This is what celebrities complain about. People giving them what they've always wanted. No, that's not fair, is it? Being chased by crowds. And losing their privacy. They ran there on foot. So I wonder how that worked, because the disciples went in a boat. The disciples had gone in a boat, but the crowds followed. On foot, running. So on foot is presumably the long way round. It must be that you wouldn't take a boat to go the long way round, you'd take a boat to get more directly to some other part across the lake somewhere. So the people were really eager. They ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. So the crowds were on the shore as they arrived at this supposedly desolate place. The crowds were there waiting. What should have been a solitary place, there were the crowds waiting. So that is like Jesus. When he arrived at the shore, immediately he was faced with a man who was demon possessed, being chased by him. Not being chased by him, but having him running towards him. This does reflect Jesus's arrival at Gennesaret. Is that the place? Let's have a look, just see if it does reflect that event. Going back to, there it is, the man with the demon. So that's the story of them crossing the lake, and there's a storm, and they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, and so on. And we find out that the unclean spirit is actually called Legion because there's so many of them, and they managed to possess 2,000 pigs. So that's a big crowd of demons. Okay, let's head back to the healing of the 5,000. This does reflect Jesus' arrival at the Gerasenes, something like that. Is it Gerasenes? I don't know. Where he was immediately met by the man with a demon that turned out to be a crowd of demons. But it's interesting, wherever Jesus' people go, desolation turns to population. Solitude replaced by crowds. Is that a principle? It's an interesting idea, isn't it? They fill the space with life. Fill emptiness with life. It's like creation, isn't it? You go to a solitary place, it's like the emptiness of the universe that God created. There was nothing, and then he said, let there be light, and there was land, and he filled the land with life. Maybe I'm reaching here and seeing stuff that more than that I should be seeing. Okay, so they're popular, they're being pursued, they can't get away, they can't get rest. Verse 34. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. Well, I suppose he's not the one that's just been on the training mission, so maybe he's got more energy than the disciples, but the focus is on Jesus's response rather than the disciples. He saw a great crowd. Okay, so then we are told what his reaction to the crowd is. Compassion. Would the disciples have seen it that way? Would I have seen the crowd that way? When we do something or go somewhere with strong expectations, and then have those expectations crushed, e.g. I expect to rest, but suddenly I'm confronted with a load more work to be done. That's what's happened here. They've gone to rest and suddenly they've got to work more. This is meant to be their spa treatment, and they're being handed the laptop. Look, we've got a Zoom meeting. Get on with it. I'm going to use that spa. It's good. People will relate to a spa, surely. Spa treatment. They're being handed the accounts to look at in detail. So the last thing you want at a spa is the accounts book. But Jesus has compassion. Why does Jesus have compassion? I don't know. Because of the sheep. Because they're like sheep without a shepherd. And we know that Jesus sees himself as the good shepherd. Certainly from John's Gospel anyway. Don't know if he talks about himself as the shepherd in Mark's Gospel, but he began to teach them many things. Jesus' compassion drives him to teach. He could probably do with a break himself, but he does it anyway out of compassion. teaching. It's important, isn't it? Let's have a look at the word compassion. That's a good word, isn't it? Splagitsomai. I wonder how you pronounce that. I can't read the Greek well enough to really pronounce that one. Splagitsomai. To have bowel. So it's one of these bowel words. They're feeling it in it. Jesus is feeling it in his bowels. Compassion and pity. And splagitsomai, that's the second word there. To be moved as to one's inwards. To be moved with compassion, to yearn with compassion, is frequently quoted of Christ towards the multitude and towards individual sufferers. Yeah, he was moved in his bowels. Okay, that's good. Get rid of those words, studies. Moved deeply, literally felt it in the bowels. So Jesus is teaching out of his compassion for the sheep without a shepherd. Jesus' shepherding is done primarily through teaching. The sheep need to know and understand Jesus for themselves. Okay, let's move on to verse 35. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late." Okay. Tell me the obvious, says Jesus. So we don't know how long Jesus taught for, but it now says the hour is late. So it must have been a long time. Disciples are wanting to move things on. They are probably tired and hungry. And want to do what they originally came here to do. So they tell Jesus how it is. This is a solitary place. It is late. And that leads us on to verse 36. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages to buy themselves something to eat. So this seems very reasonable. The people will need to eat some food, but being where they are, there is no food, or at least not enough. So they should be encouraged, or even organised to go and buy food from the surrounding centres of population. So it does make sense what they're suggesting. It's a logical answer, a logical next step. But verse 37, but he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it them to eat?" So Jesus' response is that the disciples, tired, hungry, should take charge of feeding the crowd. What do they know about mass catering? Let alone what resources have they got? So this question, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread? What's that mean? Is 200 denarii a lot? Let's have a look at this. Scroll down in the commentary. The disciples felt compelled to call Jesus' attention to the lateness of the hour and the scarcity of provision for the evening meal which was close at hand. They may have sensed a particular responsibility for the people who had followed them from the several villages to which they had ministered. From the perspective of their need, it was imperative that the people be dismissed to find food in the surrounding countryside and villages. The norms of practical judgment appeared to support their proposal. Yeah, okay, we don't get that. Although the impracticality of so large a company flocking to the neighbouring towns seems not to have been considered. Okay, so they would overwhelm the local towns' resources. That might be although it's possible the crowd would overwhelm the local villages and there not be enough food. Okay, so that makes sense. That actually on the face of it looks like a good idea, but maybe it's not. But it's the best idea they got, which is often how churches work. Is what we're going to do? Well, all we can do is, and then we come up with some half-baked idea that doesn't really solve anything. That's church life. The norms of practical judgment, yeah. So they were utterly unprepared for Jesus' instruction to provide for the needs of the multitude. This is evident from the astonishment expressed in their question about purchasing bread, which is disrespectful in tone, but points unmistakably to the impossibility of complying with Jesus' order. 200 denarii. This is what I was wondering about. What does that mean? 200 denarii was roughly equivalent to the entire year's wage of a day labourer. Okay. So in other words, the question is not a genuine question. Let's paste that in there. Just get William Lane to put it in his own words. 200 denarii is roughly equivalent to the entire wages of a day labourer. So the question that the disciples put to Jesus was a sarcastic one, because there's no way they would have that kind of money. They're stuck, aren't they? There's really nothing they can do. If they send the people away, they're going to cause a major trouble. A lot of the people are still not going to get food, and the villages will be a bit hacked off. And if they keep the people there, well, they just haven't got the food. So this is good. This is verse 38. And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, he said five. They said 5 loaves and 2 fish. So Jesus asked what food the disciples had themselves. The answer: 5 loaves and 2 fish was probably the food they had brought along to feed themselves. That was the whole point of going. That was why they went there, to rest and eat. The implication is that Jesus is telling them to feed the people with their own food, to risk going hungry themselves for the sake of the crowd. This is even though their own food couldn't possibly stretch that far. There really is that kind of huge lessons here about Jesus' ability to provide, our inability, but the need for faith to trust him when we're serving them. So then we get on to verse 39. You know what, I might actually do this. I might actually get to the end of this passage. Probably moving a bit too fast, but I can come back and do it again when the camera's not on me. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups of on the green grass. The green grass. Why the green grass? Why tell us that it's green? Is there grass there that's not green? Is that... Well, I suppose there's there's grass that's not green when it's dried out and yellowed, and there's other types of grass. Seems like a weird little detail. Jesus then took command of the situation and told the people to sit in groups. He was organising them. This is what the disciples should have been doing, but they were clueless and faithless, and Jesus had to do it. It's like if you need a job done, you can do it yourself. That's what Jesus is saying here. Sorry. But they were clueless. So Jesus had to do it himself. Okay. Verse 40. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and fifties. Groups of hundreds and fifties, which means really not even one group would have enough food. 5 loaves and 2 fish ain't going to go far enough to feed 50 people. This really is an impossible situation. And then verse 41. It just happens. It's not like he does a miracle. It just happens miraculously. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people, and he divided the 2 fish among them. So it's just normal. This is just describing what anyone would do at a normal meal. Give thanks for the food. Divide the food among the guests. So they can all eat. It doesn't read as if a miracle was even being done, but that shows how easy this was for Jesus. What is impossible for us is the mundane daily tasks for Jesus. And then we got verse 42. And they all ate and were satisfied. This is never really explained. We read the story and it's an impossible situation, and yet everyone had enough to eat. Jesus did a miracle, but we're not told that he did a miracle. Yeah, it's interesting the way it's described, the way it just happens. We haven't got enough food. What have you got? Okay, give it to me. Let's eat. And then they eat, and everybody's satisfied. And everybody has enough. And then it says in verse 43, and they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. It sounds a bit like they had more leftovers than they started with. So that makes even less sense. So that's how Jesus works. And then the bottom line to kind of shock us all. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. The final count is left to the end as a kind of punchline. 5,000 is the big reveal at the end of the story that makes you look back at what happened and marvel even more at what an amazing achievement it was. It's almost a miracle by stealth, and it's only when you get to the bottom line, there were 5,000 who ate, that you realise just what an incredible miracle it was. Well, it's what is it? It's 11 o'clock now, so I think I'll finish there. That's I think an hour is probably long enough for this kind of thing, and I've managed to get to the through the entire passage, which I probably rushed a bit and missed a few things out, but I'll be going back over it during the week, and hopefully come Sunday what I preach will be helpful. It's a challenging story. It's an encouraging story, but it challenges us not to think small but to think big, which is I think where we're at as a church. We need to be thinking big, so this is good. It's a good time to be looking at this passage this week. So look forward to Sunday. Thanks for watching.